Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So today I'm going to talk about why your quote unquote progressive ideology and their current control of the entertainment system guarantees that whatever it is you like within popular culture is going to be destroyed. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, the reason I want to go over this is because it's probably going to take an entire video to do the groundwork for that itself. And then I'm going to move on in a secondary video in order to talk about how it also destroys fundamentally the idea of a hero, and not just the traditional idea of a hero that I'm always talking about. But I'm finally going to get to that video where I tie in the traditional idea of a hero with your hero's journey that most people are familiar with. But first of all, I have to lay the groundwork for why the fundamentals of the progressive ideology are completely not just foreign to, but hostile to the idea of a hero. And we'll do that by looking at how it is hostile to, first of all, the entertainment systems, the storytelling systems within which they operate right now. Oh, and by the way, when I say the thing that you like within popular culture is going to be destroyed by your quote unquote progressive ideology, I don't just mean it's going to be taken over by this progressive ideology. I mean, it will completely collapse at some point and will become irrelevant within popular culture. And that point will be, in my estimation, within the next 10 years. But before I get there, just a reminder to everyone, there are two links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels that get back to the traditional way of making a good story and giving my audience what it asks for, and a traditional hero, all of those things that your progressive ideology want to destroy. There are 2 superhero graphic novels, one Return to Form for low fantasy, Crom the Destroyer, and I will be playing one of the trailers for Crom the Destroyer at the end of this video to give people a better sense of what my graphic novels are like if you want to know a little bit more about that. So if any of that looks or sounds appealing to you at all, click on one of those links in the description and go on over and see if one of my graphic novels is for you. All right, so I have a lot of ground to cover today. That's why, even before beginning, I know I'm going to have to separate this into 2 videos. But let's start at one of my normal starting positions. That is to use the comic industry as a microcosm for other entertainment industries that are much larger than it, because we have just simply good information about the comic industry and people there just like to talk. It is run straight through with your quote unquote progressive ideology, etc., etc. But use this again as a pattern of behavior that can be applied to whatever it is you love, especially within science fiction and fantasy type entertainment, whether it be Star Wars or Star Trek or Doctor Who or tabletop gaming or computer games. It doesn't matter. The entire thing still applies. So, if you've been following the comic industry, and I know few people do, even I, who covered it for the last 6 years in depth, am starting to fall out of covering it because it's just going to collapse. But if you pay any attention to the comic industry, mainstream comic industry at all, you might know that the Krakoan era of X-Men, where they lived segregated on an island, a genetically pure island of mutants, by the way, that has come to an end, and they were going to revamp the entire storyline, which is basically the workhorse of Marvel Comics, which is your X-Men storyline. And you had people, once again, becoming excited, at the very least, guardedly excited over the last couple of months, thinking that Marvel has finally actually listened to its core audience base. It finally came to the conclusion that they have to go back to good storytelling, that kind of thing. And again, this wasn't very large in the excitement category, but there are still people out there clinging to some hope that the ship might right itself, that we are beginning to turn a page back to normalcy. And again, I'm here to throw a wet blanket on that entire way of thinking and tell you that that is never going to happen. That there are actually only 2 outcomes of what is going to happen to this industry and other kinds of storytelling industries. Number 1, if you do want it to go back to the traditional merit-based way of telling stories, you would have to completely get rid of every last person that works there now and start from scratch, which is basically a new company. Or secondarily, they will completely collapse, and that will be the end of Marvel Comics. DC Comics, Star Wars, Star Trek, doesn't matter, whatever it is. And because these quote unquote progressive people are all about power and maintaining power and control, we know from history that they will never allow it to be completely revamped. So it will be destroyed. Because the thing is that I do have some respect for other YouTubers who have this kind of mentality that it can be saved, but they don't quite get just how pervasive and destructive your progressive ideology is. Now, who am I talking about? People like Wes over at Thinking Critical. I like Wes. He is a great guy and he covers the comic industry and he wants it to turn around, partly because that's what he's built his entire YouTube company around. And so the destruction of mainstream comics would mean the destruction of all he's worked for. So I can see where that comes from. Or Richard Meyer over at Comics Matter thinking that we can't just let it die. We can't, because there's just too much experience built up there. There's just too much history. In his estimation, if you let that die, then the entire comic industry will be completely gone. And again, I do have some respect for these people, some more than others. But the thing is that that's never going to happen. And they've been given another taste of this when these new X-Men books have been coming out and this new revamping of Marvel, which again, if this was done, 5, 10 years ago, this would have been this giant promotional thing about all new, all different Marvel. Once again, that's the kind of thing that's going on at Marvel, I think, right now. But it's fizzled and died once again. Why? Because these people realize that it's just the same crap in a new package. And I mean just the same progressive crap, which leads to crap stories in a new package. And that this is not by accident. This is not just one of the directions they could have gone in and went in the wrong direction. No, this is the only destination for storytelling if it is controlled by your progressive ideology. So let me start with the most basic that I can think of. Now, I originally did a history degree and then a political science degree before moving into a master's degree for political theory. I was eventually going to become a political science professor, but I just learned that the original places where I went to university were actually very conservative, and most of the university and university systems out there were completely bonkers with this progressive ideological disease that was overtaking them. And so I abandoned the idea of becoming a professor. But, anyways, the point is that I did all of this, started to do all of this before the turning of the last millennium. So it was in a place and time where your studying was, at the very least, still very respectful of conservative ideas, especially when thinking about things like history and politics. And the thing is that when we studied politics way back then, there wasn't this confusion about what right and left is. It was fairly simple. It would be broken down within the following explanation. Someone on the right, a conservative person, when faced with a problem, goes back to old solutions to try to solve the problem again. A liberal person on the left, when faced with a problem, would look for new solutions to a problem that had never been tried before. And that's just simply it. All the rest of the garbage that has been piled on the definitions of right and left over the last intervening 25 years mean absolutely nothing. You can just boil it down to those simple ideas. Now, here's the thing. While it may seem like the idea of moving towards a new idea to solve an old problem is a great way to do things and that it will lead to innovation, etc., there is a slight problem. Now, you remember, before I studied politics, I studied history, and there is a basic axiom of history which puts a gigantic asterisk next to the idea of moving into new solutions to everything. And that giant asterisk, again, it's an axiom, so it's not technically true in every situation, but the battleground of history, the laboratory of history, has proved this to be the case time and time again. It's the fact that when you get a new idea that actually works, it is usually 1 out of 100. That is to say, this person that has come up with this new idea that has worked, he is the 100th person out of 99 people trying other new ideas which completely failed. And why does that put a giant asterisk on the entire idea of liberalism? Well, it puts a giant asterisk there because I would say this actually can work if we're dealing with something like a system of market forces within capitalism. Why? Because if you look at the cost benefit analysis of trying new ideas when only 1 out of 100 actually work, well, that's not good odds at all. But if you're going to think that you're going to be that 100th person and you want to risk all that you have in order to try this experiment, you go ahead and do so. Why? Because market forces will correct the entire thing. If your new idea is one of those failed 99, it's going to fail, and you personally are going to have to take responsibility for choosing wrong. You lose, pure and simple. And if you want to take that chance, you go right ahead. But if you take that entire mechanism and you apply it on a societal scale, I'm sorry, no. You don't get to actually make that choice for me or an entire society worth of people, especially if you're part of a government system. Why? Because you're dealing with, first of all, other people's money. You have zero incentive to actually be innovative, zero incentive to actually work harder than the bare minimum. All of these things that come along with government negate any possibility of that 1 out of 100 actually coming true. It makes it 1 out of 10,000, most probably. And I think I can speak for the majority of people when I say my life is not your laboratory experiment. This is the entire reason why America was founded, to say, no, no, I'm going to individually pursue my life, liberty, and happiness, and you, government, get out of my way. You can defend my rights, but that's it. Other than that, you have no claim whatsoever on my life. But let's take a step backwards and go over this axiom once again, this idea that only 1 out of every 100 new ideas is actually going to succeed, at best. Well, this occurs because of a simple understanding of reason and the structure of the universe. And the simple understanding is the fact that we know what has happened in the past. Therefore, we can use what has happened in the past and that we know has happened in the past to construct a solution to our present problem. That is the entire basis of what conservative thinking is. But we have no inkling whatsoever, besides projection, of what is going to happen in the future. Therefore, there is a much firmer basis in the past to use as calculation for the problems of the present. The past has already passed through reality. It has already been subject to the rules of reality and therefore has been tested by those rules to see whether or not things work out. But the future, you projecting things into the future, you could be missing out on millions of factors within the interplay of reality that normally occur that you're not thinking about that will completely destroy whether or not your new idea is going to work. And by the way, this is the entire reason why history is a subject to begin with. You're supposed to subject the idea of history to rational and logical thinking, pick out the patterns of what has worked and what has not, according to what rules of existence actually interplay within the passage of time, and then try to project all of that into the future so that you can deal better and better with what is going on in the present. And again, I'll admit that that idea, that new idea that actually catches that 1 out of 100, that becomes something revolutionary. That becomes something that everybody is going to try to imitate and is probably going to advance your society, or at the very least, some form of the betterment of your society in some way. But you cannot count on that happening on a regular basis. This is why, by the way, I'm a conservative person. I think going back to the past, looking at history, all that kinds of thing, to understand what our present problems are and how to deal with them is the better way to deal with things. That's a conservative mindset. I don't want to pin all of my hopes, because that's what it is, a hope that this thing is going to work when there is actually no evidence that it will work. And again, there is no evidence it will work, because if there was evidence that it will work within the future, that's a conservative way of thinking. And to break it down into its logical core, it's basically the difference between understanding something that is impossible, possible, and contingent. Now, there's also the universal in there. The universal is that something will occur every place, every when, everywhere. It is universally accepted that this will occur. Impossible is to say that this thing actually can never be. Contingent is to say we know from history that this may occur given X and Y circumstances if they come to pass. But possible is the idea that there is nothing logically and rationally to say that this thing is impossible. So it could very well be possible, but we have absolutely no record of it being contingent. It has never happened in the past. Therefore, it could be, but we just simply have no idea. Now, the thing is that for liberalism, it is the idea that since we know this thing might be possible, since it's not impossible, let's try that. And again, I'll say, you want to try it? You go ahead and try it for yourself. Don't try it on my behalf. But here's the thing with progressivism, it takes it a step further. It is to put complete and utter belief in the idea that something within the future is completely true. At best, at absolute best, it is the unwavering idea that this thing in the future that could be possible will actually come to pass. At worst, and this is where we are today, it is the idea that even though we know from the past that this thing is impossible, they will continue to believe it will be possible in the future. Now, that makes no rational or logical sense, but that's par for the game for your progressive ideology. Progressive ideology is just that, ideology. It is not in any way, shape, or form rational. And to break it down in a more digestible way, it is the fact that conservative minded people place all of their hopes on the past and what has happened in the past to solve current problems. Liberals, and we're talking more traditional minded liberals, would place all of their hopes on the conditions of the present and our ability to find that one solution out of 100 to make things better. But your progressive ideology takes that one step further. It is the idea that there is something in the future that has such an existence of truth to it that it is drawing us into the future, coaxing us to find the new way of actually dealing with things. Now, as I said, this idea, this progressive idea, is completely irrational, completely illogical. Now, how do you sell that idea to people? Well, you sell that idea to people by presenting them the fact, and it indeed is a fact, that if you're relying on history to solve all your problems, you're admitting the idea that we can never have a perfect society. There is no perfect answer to anything. There's always going to be flaws, it's always going to break down, and you're always going to have to start again. You're always going to fall at some point and have to get back up. And you might see a strain of where I'm going with this when I talk about the idea of hero. But let's concentrate on what I'm talking about right now. What I have just said is absolutely the case. If there was some perfect idea within history and it actually was implemented, then it still would be perfect now. But it isn't perfect now, therefore we know there is no perfect idea within history. Every idea has a flaw, every solution has a flaw, and you're just going to have to suffer through it. And the way you sell this future idea to people is to say, you don't want to go through all of that pain. You don't want to go through all of that suffering. You don't want to have to deal with falling down. Therefore, support us and let's move into the future, a future which has no pain and suffering. That's how you sell it to people. And the way that you ensure that you can sell it to people is literally the destruction of the ideas of reason and logic. And part of the destruction of those ideas of reason and logic is to completely destroy the old way of thinking about history, to completely destroy the fact that we can use history to try to solve our present problems. Now, how is that done? Well, I've gone over that several times in the past, so I'll try to go over this with some speed. We live currently within the ideas, the hegemonical ideas within our society, controlling ideas of postmodernism. Postmodernism is a French sister to the German ideas of critical theory. Critical theory is literally and was literally set up as a new way to sell Marxist ideology to a more modern society. And at the heart of that Marxist ideology is the idea of the end of history. Now, the most relevant to the current situation that I'm discussing of all of those ideas was laid out by the critical theorists of Max Horkheimer and Theodore W. Adorno in their book called The Dialectic of Enlightenment. And what do they do within that book? Well, they take stories and they examine those stories to show how the dialectic of history is indeed true. Now, why do they do that? Well, because traditionally, what you look at in a story is a rhetorical argument. But let's go back to Aristotle when he says, yes, story is a rhetorical argument to try to argue something to people. But he goes on to say that even though it is a rhetorical argument, of the forms of argumentation, story is the easiest to corrupt. And that's exactly what Horkheimer and Adorno do within this book. They try to sell you a idea that they paint with the makeup of being somewhat logical and rational. How? By tying everything back to story, which then within the minds of their reader, they can pull on that idea that it is a rhetorical argument. It does have some logic and reason backing. No, they're just using story in order to sell this irrational idea as if it were rational. And that irrational idea is the end of history. And what they say about the end of history is basically as follows. They use a Hegelian dialectic, and I have my own problems with Hegel, but I won't get into that today. But using the Hegelian dialectic, it is the idea that you have two ideas, and those two ideas come together, they dovetail, and then they produce, as they combine, a third, new, and better idea. But here's the thing within the statements of the dialectic of enlightenment. They say, yes, this happens throughout history. You get these two old ideas, which had some merit, they combine together and they produce a third, even better idea. But at the same time, when that occurs, those two old ideas get placed beyond what they call the barrier of history. That is to say, the barrier of the unrepeatable. Since those two ideas have now become a third new idea that is better, those two ideas, those two old ideas, those parent ideas, are no longer relevant and will never be relevant again throughout the rest of history. They have been placed beyond a barrier of the unrepeatable and can no longer have any relevance within the quote unquote current time, whatever the current time is. This is quite simply the Marxist idea of the end of history, that we will continue to have these two ideas make a third better idea, and all those old ideas will be placed beyond a barrier and can never be repeated. Therefore, the future is drawing us more and more into a more and more perfect series of ideas, and those more and more perfect series of ideas will bring us into a near perfect society, which will then bring us into a utopia. Fun idea, and you can sell it to people as long as you make sure they don't think about it too much, but that's the exact thing. You got to make sure they never think about it. You got to make sure they never subject it to logic and reason, because if it is subject to even the most minute bit of logic and reason, it will completely collapse. Why? Because it's not a logical and rational form of experimentation, argumentation, anything. It is completely ideological. It is completely based on an absurd hope. And when I say absurd, I mean completely unfounded. Why do we know it's completely unfounded? Because again, if you look at history, you're able to find that no, this cannot occur. This is not the way history works. This is not the way human beings work, etc., etc. I mean, people often refer to this progressive ideology as a new religion, but it doesn't even have the basic foundation that religion itself has. I mean, you can argue, like Aristotle did, Aristotle, that person who laid down the foundations of logic itself, you can argue logically and rationally that there is a possibility of a prime mover, and therefore you can have some hope in that possibility. But what these quote unquote progressive people try to sell you as a possibility and to hope for has already been proven to be completely impossible. But the point is, and the point that I've covered in different ways in the past, the point is that this ideology must be so pervasive, must be so completely and utterly followed in a docile and uncritical way for it to even function in its most basic form. If you apply even the slightest bit of critical thinking to this entire ideology, it will fall. Now, that's the basis of the ideology itself. Now, let's look at how that ideology plays out within the minds of the individuals who actually believe what this ideology says. And for that, I'm actually thankful to somebody, I don't know who it is, a YouTube channel that posted this old interview with Thomas Sowell. It was a recording from, I think, 1995, from his promoting of his new book at that time, which was The Vision of the Anointed, which is a book I haven't thought about in a long time. So I'm thankful to that person to repost that interview from 1995. But within that book, what he talks about is the difference between basically right and left, and certainly your progressive ideology. He says your progressives, and to some extent your liberals, think in this anointed way. And he says there's two different camps. There's the anointed and there's the benighted, those people who have been knighted, also sometimes referred to as the suffering. Now, I do have my own problems with some of the things that Thomas Sowell actually says. I don't like his interpretation of history, where he thinks that all of American problems, or a lot of American problems, come from the vicious cycle of the African American community, which didn't come from them, but actually came from Highland Scots within the South. As a Highland Scot or descendant of a Highland Scot, I'm not really keen on that idea, or at the very least, I don't think he explains it very well. So I don't like all of his ideas. And to me, while I think the title of his book was actually well placed, The Vision of the Anointed, I don't think it's good to call these people the anointed. I would say call them the self anointed. And you might think that's splitting hairs, but it's really not. It's like the difference between the righteous and the self righteous. The righteous are people who shine forth what is true, but they shine forth what is true for other people to see because they are a mirror for the truth. They are a mirror that catches that light of the sun and then reflect it down upon other people. That's what the righteous actually are. The self-righteous are people who say, no, no, I'm not a mirror. I'm the actual source of that light and truth, which shines down upon you. That's the difference. And that's the difference between, as far as I'm concerned, the anointed and the self anointed. But these people, yes, they do believe that they are the anointed. They do believe they are the chosen one. They do believe they have been given this special and unique knowledge to lead all of humanity into the utopian future that they envision. And it all comes from the very mindset that I've been describing, especially that idea of placing the past beyond the barrier of the unrepeatable, and where that idea first comes from and is used for. And it is used for a way to extract all the ideology from any and all criticism, any and all subjection to reason and logic. And this plays out within the minds of these anointed ones because, again, there can be absolutely zero questioning of any of the ideological ideas. Because if you question one, it will fall. And if one falls, the entire thing will fall like a house of cards. Therefore, these people believe they are anointed, not just within what they do, but within how they think. As he goes on to explain within his book, these people believe so devotedly in the idea of the history of the future, that history that is drawing them forward, that utopia within the future, that when faced with a problem and their ideology fails, it is not the problem of their ideology, it is someone else's fault. Again, this is why I talk about several times the idea that the conservative mindset, when you run into a problem, is to point the finger at yourself and say, there's a problem here and it's most probably with me. Let me see how I can correct myself in order to make things better. But when you're on the left and you encounter a problem, you never point your finger at yourself. You point it at other people and say, they're the problem. They're getting in the way. They're gumming up the works so that my perfect solution is not actually able to take hold. And once again, this is the basic idea of the difference between a shame culture and a guilt culture that I'm always talking about. The idea of pointing the finger at someone else is a part of a shame culture. And again, part and parcel, and the most important part for what we're talking about today of this entire thing is they believe their ideas are completely and utterly true, that they are completely and utterly perfect. So that when these ideas fail within reality, and they do constantly, they are never wrong, and therefore never question them. It is someone else's fault that they did not have the result which they were supposed to have. Most notably, it would be said that, well, these conservative minded people who are dealing with old, outdated ideas that have already been placed beyond the barrier of the unrepeatable, and they're trying to resurrect these dead ideas, they're gumming up the works so that my perfect ideas don't actually come to pass, that they don't actually bear fruit. But the mindset of the progressive person is indeed that they are the anointed, is indeed that their ideas are perfect. So, one of the basic ideas of my channel and the channels that inspired my channel and many other Comicsgate channels was the idea that we were going to show these people who were creating these stories that what they were doing was bad. It wasn't selling, it was a bad story, as stories are usually constructed. Therefore, they would see the error of their ways and go back to a more traditional way of telling a story, of producing a product, a merit based way of doing it that actually worked. Go back to the last known good, start there again, and then continue on to your progressive future if you want to. That wasn't me, that would be other channels. But anyway, and once they actually come to that point, then we'll get a healthy industry. But zero of that makes any impact on the progressive people that actually run these industries. Why? Because they will never and can never, if they support their ideology, admit that they have made a mistake. If they admit even the slightest bit of a mistake, then the entire progressive ideology that they believe in completely collapses. And oh, by the way, this is part and parcel of why you get over the last 100 years people saying, well, that wasn't true communism. This is the exact same mindset. There is zero accountability on behalf of the people who produce and promote these ideas. It is always someone else's fault. And if it is always someone else's fault, then all you're ever going to get is a repackaging of those same ideas with a new paint job over and over and over again, as long as they're in control. First of all, as I said, even if you could get to a point where they admit that they have made a mistake, then the solution was, let's go back to the last known good. But they can't do that because the last known good has already been part of history. It has been placed beyond the barrier of the unrepeatable. We have moved past ideas of, let's say, a merit-based industry. That will never occur again, according to their ideology. It is a useless idea that is now dead and buried. They will never go back to that. But you can't even get them to that point because you can never get them to admit that what they're doing actually doesn't work. There is zero way that you will ever get them to admit that unless they're ready to abandon completely and utterly their ideology. And let's play that out according to what we know. Very, very few of those progressive people will ever get to that point. But even if one of them does manage to get to that point, they will be completely and utterly ostracized, driven out of their industry as a heretic. And so, again, the only way you will possibly be able to even correct a ship that has been taken over completely by this progressive ideology is to completely remove every last single person that is now there and replace them with new people, which is basically starting an entire new company. So, first off, why not just start an entire new company? And secondly, if you attempt to do that, they will completely and utterly destroy everything before they leave. We know this. We have seen their attempts to do so with Twitter and other companies. This is why Twitter had to rebrand itself as X. It is a completely new company. And as far as I can tell, it is the 1 in 100 where this actually has or will work. But again, the important part of this entire thing that I've been talking about is the fact that according to the fundamental ideas that make up the progressive ideology, they can simply never, ever, ever admit that they have made a mistake. And any new product that they produce is going to be built upon that principle. The principle that last time when it didn't work, they didn't make a mistake. Someone else gummed up the works. Someone else caused a problem so that this thing didn't sell like hotcakes. So they're just going to repackage the same ideas over again, give it a shiny new coat with the exact same engine underneath, and say, here's something new. And our society has fallen for it over and over and over again because we are addicted to the new, because we are addicted to that idea, that utopian idea that you don't have to deal with the suffering of the present or the past, that you don't have to fall down and get back up, that you can fix your eyes in the utopia and it will draw you to it. And that is quite simply an idea that leads to nothing but destruction. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe. And quickly, just a couple of reminders. Number one, this is the first video in a 2-video series. Next week, I'm going to take all of these principles and apply them to the idea of a hero, to the idea of a hero's journey, to the simple character growth of a protagonist, and show why they completely destroy all of that. Secondly, just a reminder that there are 2 links in the description for my 3 graphic novels that go back to the last known good of good storytelling and focus on the traditional idea of a hero. You're looking at some of the art for that in the background. So if any of that looks or sounds appealing to you at all, click on one of those links in the description and go on over and order yourself a copy of one of my graphic novels today. And I am going to be playing, as I said, a very short trailer for Crom the Destroyer, one of my graphic novels, in just a moment. All right, I'll leave it there. I'll see you later. Bye.
No matter how many wars you fight, no matter how much blood you shed, no matter how much rage you loose, no matter how many demons you face, no matter how many companions you lose, no matter if our kingdom falls, I know that you will return to me in honor.